The scent of pine and damp earth should have been comforting, but tonight it only reminded me of how far I was from anything resembling home. The gathering hall of the Crescent Moon Pack buzzed with anticipation, voices rising and falling like waves against a shore I'd never been invited to walk along. I stood near the back wall, fingers twisted in the fabric of my borrowed dress, too fine for someone like me, but Luna Margot had insisted. "You'll represent our pack tonight, dear," she'd said, her smile kind but her eyes distant, already looking past me toward something I couldn't see. I wasn't naive. I knew what this was. The annual Unity Gathering brought together packs from across the Northern Territories, a tradition meant to foster alliances, and, if the whispers were true, to parade unmated Omegas before the eyes of powerful Alphas. My pulse hammered beneath my skin, a trapped bird seeking escape. I'd turned 23 last month, ancient by Omega standards, still unbonded and somehow defective in ways no healer could name. While other Omegas bloomed with that intoxicating sweetness that drew Alphas like moths to flame, I'd always been muted, faint, a watercolor painting left too long in the sun. "Stand straighter," Margot's beta, Sienna, hissed beside me, her elbow sharp against my ribs. "You're making us look weak." I straightened, though my legs trembled with the effort. The dress, cream silk that caught the firelight, felt like a costume. Like I was playing at being something I'd never be. Around me, other Omegas preened and laughed, their confidence a language I'd never learned to speak. They belonged here. They understood the unspoken rules of desire and display, of calculated glances and practiced curves of the neck that exposed the vulnerable line of the throat. I understood only solitude, and the particular ache of being looked through rather than at. The hall's massive doors groaned open, and the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Conversation stuttered and died. Even the fire in the great hearth flickered, as if bowing to some unseen force. I felt it before I saw him, a pressure against my chest, heavy and absolute, like standing at the base of a mountain and feeling the weight of all that stone above you. The Alpha King had arrived. I'd heard the stories, of course. Everyone had. Rowan Ashford, ruler of the Northern Territories, undefeated in combat, unmated by choice. They said he was carved from winter itself. Cold, unforgiving, and devastatingly beautiful in the way that dangerous things often are. They said his wolf was black as a moonless night and twice as merciless. They said he'd killed his own father in challenge and hadn't smiled since. I didn't believe in fairy tales anymore, but when he stepped through those doors, something in my chest pulled tight and refused to let go. He was taller than I'd imagined, broad-shouldered and lean in the way of predators who've never known a moment's softness. His hair was dark, almost black, falling just past his collar, and his eyes, gods, his eyes, were the pale gold of amber held up to candlelight. They swept the room with calculated disinterest, and I watched alphas and betas alike drop their gazes in automatic submission. I should have looked away too. Any sensible Omega would have. But there was something about the set of his jaw, the way his hands hung loose at his sides despite the tension radiating from every line of his body, that made me think of a wolf caught in a trap of his own making. He looked like a man who'd forgotten what it meant to want anything beyond duty and survival. I knew that look. I wore it every time I caught my reflection. His gaze continued its sweep, and then stopped on me. The world narrowed to the space between us. My breath caught. His eyes were nothing like I'd expected. Not cold at all, but burning, a wildfire barely contained behind glass. For 3 heartbeats, he looked at me like I was the only person in the room, like he could see through skin and bone to whatever broken thing lived inside my chest. Then his expression shuttered completely, going blank as fresh snow, and he looked away. I released a breath I hadn't known I was holding. My hands were shaking. Sienna grabbed my wrist hard enough to bruise. "What did you do?" she whispered, her voice sharp with panic. "Why did he look at you like that?" "I don't know," I managed. And it was the truth. I was nobody. Nothing. A placeholder Omega in a borrowed dress, playing a role I'd never auditioned for. The Alpha King moved through the crowd like water parting around stone. Alphas approached him with careful deference, offering greetings he acknowledged with the barest nod. He was looking for something, or someone. His nostrils flared slightly, scenting the air, and my stomach dropped. "He's searching for his mate," an Omega near me breathed, her voice dreamy with longing. Can you imagine? Being chosen by him? I couldn't. Didn't want to. The very idea felt like standing too close to a fire, knowing you'd burn but unable to step back. Luna Margot appeared at my elbow, her smile stretched too wide. Ivy, she said quietly, using my name for perhaps the third time since I'd joined her pack 5 years ago. Come with me. Now. She didn't wait for my response, just gripped my arm and steered me through the crowd toward a side corridor. Sienna followed, her expression grim. My heart hammered against my ribs. Had I done something wrong? Broken some protocol I didn't know existed? We ducked into a small antechamber, and Margot released me, smoothing her hands over her elaborate gown. She looked nervous. I'd never seen her nervous. Luna? I ventured. Did I... Listen carefully, she interrupted, her voice low and urgent. What I'm about to tell you cannot leave this room. Do you understand? I nodded, confusion mixing with the first cold tendrils of fear. Margot exchanged a look with Sienna, then turned back to me. The Alpha King is here for a reason. He needs an Omega. Not as a mate. He has no interest in the bond. But there are political complications, threats from the southern packs. They're demanding he take a queen, produce an heir, show stability. He's refused for years, but the pressure has become too great. My mind raced, trying to understand what any of this had to do with me. There's an Omega, Margot continued. From the Riverside pack. Her name is Elena. She's special, incredibly powerful bloodline, gentle disposition. Everything an Omega should be. The king has agreed to a public courtship with her. A show, really. To satisfy the council and quiet the dissent. Then why? Because Elena is terrified of him, Sienna cut in bluntly. Absolutely petrified, can barely stand to be in the same room without having a panic attack. They need time. Time for her to adjust, to learn to tolerate his presence. Time to make the courtship look genuine. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. You want me to be a distraction. Margot's smile turned apologetic but didn't reach her eyes. A decoy. Just for a few weeks, perhaps a month. You'll be seen with him at official functions. Draw attention away from Elena while she and her handlers work on the real connection. You're perfect for this. Unremarkable enough that no one will believe you're truly his choice, but Omega enough to make the charade plausible. Unremarkable. The word landed like a slap, even though I'd thought the same thing about myself 1,000 times. And if I refuse? The temperature in the room dropped. Margot's kindness evaporated like morning mist. You're packless, Ivy. I took you in when your birth pack exiled you for being... What was it they said? Defective? I've fed you, housed you, asked for nothing in return. This is me calling in that debt. Her voice softened, became almost gentle. It's not a terrible thing I'm asking. You'll be well compensated. And when it's over, you'll return here with enough resources to start over anywhere you choose. Maybe even find a pack that will accept you properly. My throat tightened. She was right, of course. I owed her everything. And what was a few weeks of pretending compared to 5 years of genuine shelter? But something in my chest twisted painfully at the thought of being used as a shield for someone else's love story. Of being the placeholder, the temporary, the forgettable, again. Does he know? I asked quietly. The Alpha King. Does he know I'm just... a pawn? Margot and Sienna exchanged another look. He knows, Margot confirmed. This was partly his idea. He needs someone who won't develop real feelings, who understands the arrangement is purely transactional, someone who won't complicate things when it ends. Someone disposable. I closed my eyes, breathing through the ache. When I opened them again, I'd made my choice. Not because I wanted to, but because I'd learned long ago that survival sometimes meant swallowing your pride and accepting the role others scripted for you. What do I have to do? Relief flooded Margot's features. Tonight you'll be introduced to him formally. Tomorrow you'll move to the royal house for the duration of the arrangement. You'll attend functions, be seen together, play the role of potential queen. That's all. No actual bond, no mark, no intimacy. Just appearances. Just appearances. Just my life reduced to theater for someone else's benefit. Come, Sienna said, already moving toward the door. We need to get you back before people notice you're gone. I followed them back into the great hall, my legs moving on autopilot. The noise hit me like a physical wave. Laughter and music and the clink of glasses. Everything looked the same as when I'd left, but I felt fundamentally altered, like I'd crossed some invisible threshold and couldn't find my way back. The Alpha King stood near the center of the room now, surrounded by pack leaders vying for his attention. His posture was rigid, shoulders set as if bracing for battle. He looked profoundly alone despite the crowd, and I wondered if anyone else could see it. The isolation that clung to him like a second skin. As if sensing my gaze, his head turned. Those amber eyes found mine across the distance, and this time I saw it clearly, recognition. Not of me specifically, but of something he understood, something that mirrored back his own carefully hidden wounds. He knew what it meant to be a thing rather than a person, a symbol rather than a soul. Margot touched my lower back, urging me forward. Time to meet your temporary king. I moved through the crowd, each step feeling like walking through deep water. People parted instinctively, sensing the shift in energy, watching with curious eyes as I approached the most powerful alpha in the territory. He watched me come, expression unreadable. When I stopped before him, close enough to catch his scent, cedar and snow and something darker, like the moment before a storm breaks, he tilted his head slightly. You're the one, he said. Not a question. Yes, Your Majesty. My voice came out steadier than I felt. His eyes narrowed fractionally. What's your name? Ivy Thorne. Ivy, he repeated. And the way he said it, careful and deliberate, made something flutter dangerously in my chest. Do you understand what you've agreed to? I understand I'm here to make things easier for everyone else, sir. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or approval. Good. I don't like deception, but I appreciate directness. He paused, then added more quietly. This won't be pleasant for either of us, but I'll ensure you're treated with respect. It was more than I'd expected, more than I probably deserved. Thank you, I whispered. He held out his hand, palm up, an invitation. Around us, conversations had stopped. Everyone was watching, waiting to see if the broken Omega would be stupid enough to touch the hand of a king. I placed my hand in his. His skin was warm, warmer than I'd expected from someone who seemed carved from winter. His fingers closed around mine with surprising gentleness, and for just a moment, I felt the tremor that ran through him, as if he was as unsettled by the contact as I was. He leaned down slightly, bringing his mouth close to my ear. To anyone watching, it would look intimate, romantic. Try not to hate me too much by the end of this, he murmured. I'm already hated enough. Then he straightened, released my hand, and turned to address the room. I've found what I came for, he announced, his voice carrying effortlessly over the crowd. This Omega will accompany me back to the royal house. Prepare yourself, he said, looking at me with those burning amber eyes. Your life just changed. And God's help me, I believed him. The royal house rose from the forest like something from a fever dream. All stone and shadow and impossible angles that seemed to defy the laws of architecture. We'd traveled through the night, Rowan silent in the carriage across from me, his gaze fixed on the darkness beyond the window as if he could see things I couldn't. Maybe he could. There was something ancient about him, something that made my wolf, usually so quiet she was barely a whisper, stir uneasily beneath my skin. Dawn was breaking when we arrived, painting the sky in shades of blood orange and deep purple. The estate sprawled across what must have been 100 acres, ringed by walls that seemed more symbolic than necessary. What enemy would dare attack the Alpha King in his own territory? Home, Rowan said flatly, the first word he'd spoken in hours. He didn't sound like he meant it. A woman waited at the entrance, tall, severe, with iron-gray hair pulled back so tightly it looked painful. Her eyes swept over me with the precision of a blade, cataloging every inadequacy in a single glance. This is Helen, Rowan said as we stepped from the carriage. She manages the household. Anything you need, ask her. Anything you want to know, ask her. She's been with my family since before I was born. His voice softened almost imperceptibly on that last part, the only hint of something like affection I'd heard from him. Helen dipped her head in a gesture that was more acknowledgement than respect. Miss Thorne, your rooms have been prepared. I trust you'll find them adequate. I'm sure they'll be more than adequate, I said quietly, already feeling the weight of judgment pressing down on me. "Come," Rowan said. And I followed him through doors that must have been 15 feet tall into an entrance hall that could have swallowed my old pack house whole. Everything was dark wood and stone, beautiful in a harsh, uncompromising way. Like him. He led me up a sweeping staircase, down a corridor lined with portraits of wolves mid-hunt, their painted eyes seeming to track our movement. When he finally stopped before a set of double doors, he turned to face me. "These are your quarters. Mine are at the end of the hall." He paused, jaw working as if the next words cost him something. "I don't expect you to. I won't come to your rooms uninvited. This is an arrangement, not a prison." "Thank you," I managed, though gratitude felt like the wrong emotion for the strange kindness in his statement. He reached past me to open the door, and for a moment we were close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body, could see the faint scar that cut through his left eyebrow. Close enough to notice that his eyes weren't just gold. They had flecks of green near the center, like moss growing on amber. He stepped back abruptly. "Rest. Tomorrow we have a council meeting. You'll need to be present." His voice had gone cold again. The brief softness vanished. "Helen will bring you appropriate clothing." Then he was gone, his footsteps echoing down the corridor, leaving me alone in a doorway between my old life and whatever this new one would become. The rooms were magnificent, a bedroom 3 times the size of any I'd ever occupied, with a bed large enough for 4 people and windows that overlooked the forest. An attached sitting room with shelves full of books and a fireplace already crackling with warmth. A bathroom with a tub so deep I could probably swim in it. It felt like a gilded cage. I moved to the window, pressing my palm against the cool glass. Beyond the manicured grounds, the forest stretched dark and endless. I wondered if Rowan ever ran there, if his wolf found any freedom in those trees, or if he was as trapped as I was, just in a prettier prison. A knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. Helen entered without waiting for permission, carrying an armful of fabric. "For tomorrow," she said, laying everything across the bed with military precision. Dresses, undergarments, shoes, all in shades of cream, silver, and pale blue. Colors that would complement without overwhelming. Colors for someone meant to be seen but not remembered. "They're beautiful," I said, because they were, even if they made me feel like I was playing dress-up in someone else's life. Helen studied me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "You're not what I expected. I'm sure I'm not what anyone expected." "No," she agreed. "You're too honest. Too—" She searched for the word. "Present. The others were always performing. You just are." I wasn't sure if that was a compliment or an observation. The others? The Omegas who've tried to catch his attention over the years. They come in smelling like desperation and leave in tears. She moved to the window, looking out at the same view I'd been studying. "He's not cruel, our king, but he's broken in ways that don't heal. Whatever you think this arrangement is, whatever you hope it might become, let those hopes die now, for your own sake." My chest tightened. "I'm not hoping for anything. Good." Helen turned back to me, and her expression had softened fractionally. "Then you might survive this intact. There's dinner in an hour. Someone will come fetch you." She left as efficiently as she'd arrived, and I was alone again with my thoughts and the impossible luxury surrounding me. I spent the hour exploring my rooms, running my fingers over silk curtains and leather-bound books, trying to convince myself this was real. That I, Ivy Thorne, exiled, defective, forgettable, was standing in the Alpha King's house, wearing his hospitality like an ill-fitting coat. When the knock came, I changed into one of the simpler dresses Helen had brought, a pale gray that made me look like a ghost. Fitting. A young woman stood in the corridor, perhaps 20, with warm brown skin and curious dark eyes. She smiled when she saw me, the first genuine smile I'd received since arriving. "Miss Thorne? I'm Nadia. I'm supposed to escort you to dinner." She had a slight accent I couldn't place. Musical and soft. "Please, call me Ivy. Miss Thorne makes me sound like someone's disapproving aunt." Nadia's smile widened. "Ivy, then. Come on, before the food gets cold. Cook gets testy when people are late, and you don't want to see her testy." I followed her through a maze of corridors, trying to memorize the route and failing completely. The house seemed designed to disorient. to remind you that you didn't belong, couldn't possibly know all its secrets. How long have you worked here? I asked as we descended yet another staircase. 3 years. My father's the groundskeeper, so I grew up playing in these halls. When I was old enough, His Majesty gave me a position. She glanced at me sideways. He's not as scary as everyone thinks, you know. He's actually kind, when he remembers how to be. You sound like you care about him. Everyone who really knows him does, Nadia said simply. The problem is, he doesn't let many people really know him. We emerged into a dining room that was somehow both grand and intimate. A long table that could seat 30, but only 2 places set at one end. Rowan stood by the window, still wearing the same dark clothing from earlier, looking like a painting titled Solitude. He turned when we entered, and something in his posture shifted. Not quite relaxation, but a loosening of the rigid control he held over himself. Nadia, he acknowledged with a slight nod, then his eyes found mine. Ivy. I hope your rooms are satisfactory. They're more than satisfactory, I said, moving to the chair Nadia pulled out for me. Thank you. Rowan waited until I was seated before taking his own chair, a gesture of courtesy that surprised me. Nadia disappeared through a side door, and then we were alone with the weight of silence and whatever conversation we were supposed to have. Servants appeared with food, roasted meat, vegetables and cream sauce, bread that smelled like heaven, enough to feed 10 people, served to 2 who barely knew how to talk to each other. The council meeting tomorrow, Rowan began, cutting into his food with precise movements. It will be contentious. There are those who oppose any Omega influence and governance. They'll be watching you, looking for weakness. What should I do? Nothing. Say nothing unless directly addressed. Stay beside me. Let them see you're under my protection. And do not, under any circumstances, show fear. He looked up, holding my gaze. They'll smell it if you do. Predators always smell fear, and if they attack me verbally, they won't. His voice had gone hard, final. Anyone who disrespects you disrespects me. They know better. The protection in his words should have felt comforting. Instead, it reminded me of my position, a possession to be defended, not a person to be valued. We ate in silence for several minutes, the clink of silverware against china the only sound. I wanted to ask him things, why he'd agreed to this charade, what had made him so isolated, if he ever got tired of carrying the weight of everyone's expectations, but the question stuck in my throat. You're quiet, he observed. Most Omegas can't stop talking when they're nervous. Would you prefer I chatter about nothing? No. He set down his fork, regarding me with that intense focus that made me feel simultaneously seen and transparent. I prefer honesty, even uncomfortable honesty. I took a breath, deciding to risk it. Then honestly, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to pretend to be something I'm not, or how to play a role in your political theater. I'm going to make mistakes, probably embarrass you, definitely disappoint everyone who expects some fairy tale Omega, and I don't know how to be okay with being temporary. The silence that followed felt enormous. I'd said too much, been too raw, violated every rule of Omega submission and grace. Then Rowan did something I didn't expect. He laughed. It was a short, rough sound, like he'd forgotten how, and had to relearn the mechanics, but it was genuine. It transformed his face, made him look younger, almost boyish. Gods, he said, shaking his head. You really are exactly what Margot promised. Unmarketable. But the way he said it didn't sound like an insult. It sounded almost like relief. I'll try to take that as a compliment. You should. He leaned back in his chair, studying me with new interest. Everyone else performs. You just exist. It's refreshing. His expression sobered. And for what it's worth, I don't expect you to be anything other than what you are. This arrangement works precisely because neither of us wants it. No expectations means no disappointments. That's a sad philosophy. It's a realistic one. I wanted to argue, to say that life without expectations was just slow death, but I couldn't. Not when I'd lived by the same philosophy for years. Tell me something, I said instead. Something real. If we're going to convince anyone this is genuine, I should probably know more about you than what the rumors say. His jaw tightened. What do the rumors say? That you're cold, ruthless, that you killed your father and felt nothing, that you've never loved anyone and never will. And you want to know if they're true. I want to know who you actually are beneath the crown." For a long moment, I thought he wouldn't answer. His fingers drummed once against the table, a tell of agitation, and his eyes went distant. "My father," he said finally, voice carefully neutral, "was not a good man. He was brutal, vindictive, and believed power was maintained through fear. When I challenged him, it wasn't murder. It was justice. But the pack doesn't see it that way. They see a son who spilled his father's blood and wonder what else I'm capable of." He paused. "As for love, I love my mother. She died when I was 12. I loved my younger sister, Celia. She died in a raid when I was 16. I learned that love is just another word for eventual loss. So no, I don't love anyone now. It's safer that way." The pain in his words was so carefully controlled, it almost sounded like indifference. Almost. But I heard it. The echo of a boy who'd learned to bury everything soft beneath layers of ice and duty. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "Don't be. Everyone loses people. Some of us just build better walls afterward. Or just higher ones." His eyes snapped to mine, sharp and assessing. "You're perceptive. I'm practiced at reading the things people don't say. It's a survival skill when you're always on the outside. Is that what you are? An outsider?" I smiled without humor. "Always. My birth pack exiled me for being a weak Omega who couldn't attract a mate. Margot's pack tolerated me but never accepted me. And now I'm here, playing temporary queen to a king who doesn't want one. I've made a career of not belonging." "Then we're well matched," Rowan said, and there was something almost like kinship in his voice. "I'm a king surrounded by people and utterly alone." The moment stretched between us, fragile and strange. Two broken things recognizing their own fractures in someone else. A door opened, and Helen appeared. "Your Majesty, forgive the interruption. There's a message from the Riverside Pack. Urgent, they say." Rowan's entire demeanor shifted, the brief vulnerability vanishing behind the mask of the king. "I'll receive it in my study." He stood, then looked at me. "Tomorrow, breakfast at dawn. I'll walk you through what to expect from the council. Sleep well, Ivy." He left, and I was alone with Helen, who regarded me with an expression I couldn't read. "He talked to you," she said, sounding almost surprised. "We had dinner. Talking seemed appropriate." "No, I mean, he actually talked. About himself. I've worked in this house for 30 years, and I can count on one hand the number of people he's spoken to like that." She shook her head. "Careful, girl. Whatever this arrangement is supposed to be, don't let it become something real. His heart is a graveyard. Everyone who's tried to plant flowers there has been buried instead." With that cheerful warning, she gestured for me to follow her back to my rooms. I lay awake long after she left, staring at the ceiling, thinking about broken kings and temporary arrangements, and the dangerous pull of recognition, of seeing someone else who understood what it meant to survive by becoming stone. Somewhere in the house, a door closed. I wondered if Rowan was reading his urgent message, handling whatever crisis demanded his attention, or if he was staring at his own ceiling, thinking about the same strange connection that had flickered to life over dinner. I wondered if he felt it too, that sense of standing on the edge of something that could either save or destroy us both. And I wondered, with a cold curl of fear in my stomach, if Helen was right. If loving him would be just another way to die. The council chamber was designed to intimidate. Vaulted ceilings that swallowed sound, walls lined with weapons from conflicts I couldn't name, and a circular table of black stone that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of midnight. 12 chairs surrounded it, 11 occupied by alphas whose combined authority could level kingdoms. And me, standing behind Rowan's chair like an ornament, wearing a dress the color of winter moonlight. "Gentlemen," Rowan said, his voice carrying the kind of authority that didn't need to be raised. "Some of you have already heard, but I'll make it official. I've chosen an Omega. Her name is Ivy Thorne, and she stands under my protection. Anyone who questions her presence questions me." 11 pairs of eyes turned to assess me. I kept my spine straight, my expression neutral, my hands folded in front of me. I would not show fear. I would not give them the satisfaction. "She's very," one alpha began, a man with silver hair and a scar bisecting his face. "Pale? Northern bloodline? Does it matter?" Rowan's tone could have cut glass. Of course not, Your Majesty. I merely wonder about her lineage. For the historical records. The Alpha's smile was all teeth. After all, a queen's bloodline becomes relevant when there are heirs to consider. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Rowan's fingers curled around the arm of his chair, knuckles going white. Cassius, he said softly, and the name carried enough threat to make the silver-haired Alpha pale slightly. Miss Thorne's bloodline is none of your concern. What should concern you is the rising conflict with the Eastern Territories. That's why we're here. Not to gossip about my personal affairs. Cassius dipped his head in submission, but his eyes, when they flickered to me, held calculation. He was measuring me, finding me wanting, and filing that information away for later use. The meeting proceeded, talk of border disputes and resource allocation and alliances that meant nothing to me but clearly held weight for everyone else. I tried to follow, to understand the complex web of politics and power that governed pack life at this level, but it was like trying to read a book in a language I'd never learned. Rowan's hand moved, a small gesture toward the empty chair beside him. An invitation. I hesitated. Sitting would make me more visible, more of a target. But standing made me look subservient, decorative. Neither option felt safe. I sat. Several Alphas exchanged glances. One, younger than the others, with kind eyes and brown skin, smiled slightly, as if approving the choice. The others looked like they'd swallowed something sour. Bold, Cassius murmured, loud enough to be heard. Perhaps Your Majesty has finally found an Omega with spine. Careful, Cassius, Rowan said without looking at him. Your jealousy is showing. The barb landed. Cassius's jaw tightened, and satisfaction flickered through me despite the danger of the situation. Rowan might be using me, but at least he defended me while doing it. The meeting dragged on for 2 hours. By the end, my head throbbed and my body ached from holding myself so rigidly. When Rowan finally dismissed the council, I stood with as much grace as I could muster, aware that every movement was being judged. The kind-eyed Alpha approached as the others filed out. Sebastian. He introduced himself, offering his hand. Southern Territory representative. It's a pleasure to meet you, Miss Thorne. His grip was warm, his smile genuine. I liked him immediately, and distrusted that instinct just as quickly. In a room full of predators, kindness was often the sharpest weapon. The pleasure is mine, Alpha Sebastian. Just Sebastian, please. We're not so formal in the South. He glanced at Rowan, something passing between them. Old friendship, maybe, or mutual respect. You've chosen well, Your Majesty. An Omega who sits when invited instead of waiting for permission. That takes courage. Or ignorance, Cassius said from the doorway, his tone light, but his eyes hard. Sometimes the two look remarkably similar. Cassius. Rowan's voice was a whip crack. You're dismissed. The silver-haired Alpha left, but not before sending me one last assessing look that made my skin crawl. Don't mind him, Sebastian said once we were alone. Cassius has been angling for more influence for years. He sees any change as a threat to his position. He turned back to me. You handled that well. Many Omegas would have crumbled under that kind of scrutiny. I'm not many Omegas. No. Sebastian agreed, his smile widening. I don't think you are. He clapped Rowan on the shoulder with easy familiarity. I'll see you both at the gathering tonight. Try not to terrify her too much before then. He left, and I was alone with Rowan in the cavernous chamber. The silence felt different now, heavier, charged with something I couldn't name. You did well, Rowan said finally, his voice softer than it had been during the meeting. Better than I expected. That's a low bar. He almost smiled. Perhaps. But you met it anyway. He moved toward the door, then paused, looking back at me. Tonight there's a gathering. Minor nobility, pack leaders, the usual political circus. We'll need to appear together, comfortable with each other. Can you do that? Pretend to be comfortable with you? Pretend that this is real. The question hung between us, weighted with implications neither of us wanted to examine too closely. Could I pretend? Could I stand beside him, smile at the right moments, play the role of chosen Omega when every instinct screamed that I was the understudy, the placeholder, the temporary? I can try, I said. That's all I ask. The gathering was everything I'd feared and worse. The ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and silk gowns, the air thick with expensive perfume and barely veiled judgment. I stood at Rowan's side, my hand resting lightly in the crook of his elbow, feeling every eye in the room dissecting us. "Smile," Rowan murmured, his lips barely moving. "You look like you're attending an execution." "Maybe I am." His fingers tightened fractionally on mine. Reassurance or warning, I couldn't tell. We moved through the crowd, Rowan acknowledging greetings with minimal effort while I tried to remember how to breathe normally. "Your Majesty!" A woman appeared before us, all cascading dark curls and curves that defied physics. Her omega scent was intoxicating. Honeysuckle and vanilla, and something that made every alpha within 20 feet turn their heads. "How wonderful to see you, and this must be the omega everyone's talking about." There was something predatory in her smile, something that set my teeth on edge. "Lady Vivian," Rowan said, his tone carefully neutral. "Allow me to introduce Ivy Thorne." "Ivy, Lady Vivian manages the Western Estates." "Charming," Vivian purred, her eyes raking over me with undisguised contempt. "So?" "Understated. How refreshing after all those omegas who tried so hard to catch your attention." She's clearly taken a different approach. The insult was wrapped in compliment, poisonous and precise. "Vivian." Rowan's voice dropped to a tone I'd learned meant danger. "Careful." "Oh, I meant no offense. I simply think it's brave of you to choose someone so ordinary. It shows character, depth." Her smile was all innocence, her eyes all malice. I'm sure she has hidden qualities that aren't immediately apparent to the rest of us. My face burned, but I kept my expression serene. This was a test. Another one. They would never stop testing me, never stop looking for the cracks. "You're right," I said quietly. "I am ordinary. I can't compete with omegas who smell like walking aphrodisiacs, or who've trained their entire lives to catch an alpha's eye. But that's precisely why His Majesty chose me. He wanted someone real, not a performance." Vivian's smile froze. Around us, several people had stopped their conversations to listen. "How quaint," she managed. "If you'll excuse us," Rowan said, already moving us away, his hand firm against my back. "We have other guests to greet." When we were out of earshot, he leaned down slightly. That was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Can it be both? This time he did smile, quick and genuine. "Yes, I suppose it can." We continued our circuit of the room, and I tried to ignore the whispers that followed us. The way omegas looked at me with confusion or pity. The way alphas assessed me and found me lacking. I was drowning in silk and judgment, and the only anchor I had was the solid presence of the man beside me. "There," Rowan said suddenly, his body tensing. "Near the terrace doors." I followed his gaze and saw her. She was everything I wasn't, petite and delicate, with dark hair that fell in perfect waves and skin like porcelain. Her omega scent was subtle but unmistakably powerful, the kind that promised safety and home, and all the things that made alphas stupid with wanting. She wore a dress of deep emerald that made her look like some fairy tale creature, beautiful and untouchable. Elena. It had to be. She was surrounded by admirers, but her eyes were fixed on something across the room with an intensity that bordered on fear. I followed her gaze and saw Rowan. Or rather, saw the way she looked at Rowan. Like he was a natural disaster she couldn't escape, terrible and inevitable. "She's terrified," I whispered. "I know." His voice was flat, emotionless, but I heard the hurt beneath it. "She has been since the first time we met. I've done nothing to her, shown her nothing but respect, and still she looks at me like I'm a monster. Maybe it's not about you. Maybe she's afraid of what you represent. The power, the position, the loss of choice." He looked down at me, something unreadable in his amber eyes. "When did you become wise?" "When I learned that fear isn't always rational. Sometimes it's just accumulated damage that attaches itself to whatever's in front of you." We stood there, watching Elena laugh at something one of her admirers said, watching her carefully not look in our direction. The contrast was almost painful. Her surrounded by warmth and light, us standing in our own isolated bubble of complicated pretense. "She'll make a good queen," Rowan said quietly, "when she's ready. She's kind, intelligent, loved by everyone who meets her. Everything a ruler's mate should be." And I'm everything she's not. You're different, not less. The words settled over me like a balm on a wound I hadn't realized was open. I wanted to believe him, wanted to accept the comfort he offered, but reality was a sharper teacher than kindness. We should probably be seen dancing, I said, changing the subject before I could do something stupid like thank him for defending a lie. Isn't that what couples do at these things? Rowan's expression shifted, surprise, then something that might have been amusement or dread. I don't dance. Everyone dances. I don't. Well, tonight you do. Unless you want people to wonder why the Alpha King won't touch his chosen Omega even for a simple waltz. He stared at me for a long moment, jaw working, clearly weighing his hatred of dancing against the political necessity. Finally, he sighed, a sound of pure resignation. You're going to be difficult, aren't you? Probably. He took my hand, leading me toward the dance floor with the enthusiasm of a man approaching his own execution. When he turned to face me, pulling me into the proper position, I felt the tremor that ran through him. Not fear, but something else. Discomfort with intimacy, maybe, or unfamiliarity with gentleness. The music began, something slow and haunting. Rowan moved with surprising grace, his hand warm against my waist, guiding me through steps I half remembered from lessons a lifetime ago. You're better at this than you claimed, I observed. I lied. I do dance. I just hate it. Why? Because it requires vulnerability. Letting someone that close, matching their rhythm, trusting them not to stumble. His eyes met mine. I'm not good at vulnerability. Neither am I. Then we're well matched. We moved together, two people pretending to be something we weren't. And for just a moment, it almost felt real. His hand was steady on my back, my hand light on his shoulder, and the space between us charged with the kind of tension that came from two people who understood each other's damage just a little too well. Around us, people watched, judged, whispered. Let them, I thought. Let them see what they expected to see. A king playing at love with an ordinary Omega. Let them never know the truth, that both of us were drowning, and this dance was just another way to keep our heads above water. When the song ended, Rowan stepped back, his expression carefully composed. But his hand lingered on mine for just a moment longer than necessary, and in that moment, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Surprise, confusion, maybe even a hint of something dangerous that looked almost like longing. Then he released me, the mask sliding back into place. Thank you for the dance, Miss Thorne. The pleasure was mine, Your Majesty. We were back to formality, back to the roles we'd been assigned. But something had shifted. Some invisible line had been crossed, and neither of us could pretend otherwise. That night, I lay awake in my too large bed, thinking about a king who hated dancing but did it anyway, about an Omega who inspired terror instead of love, and about myself, caught between them, temporary and replaceable, trying desperately not to feel anything real in a situation built entirely on lies. 3 weeks, I told myself, maybe 4. Then this would end. Elena would take her rightful place, and I'd return to being invisible. The thought should have been comforting. Instead, it felt like another kind of death. 3 weeks became 4. 4 became 5. The arrangement that was supposed to be temporary stretched like taffy, pulled thin by complications no one had anticipated. Elena still couldn't bear to be in the same room as Rowan for more than 10 minutes. The Southern Pax were growing restless, demanding proof of stability, and somewhere along the way, something between Rowan and me had shifted from tolerable pretense to something far more dangerous. We'd developed routines, morning walks through the estate grounds, where he'd point out landmarks and tell me stories about his childhood, small offerings of truth that felt like gifts. Afternoon council sessions where I sat beside him, no longer an ornament but an observer, occasionally offering thoughts he'd actually consider. Evening meals where our conversations ranged from politics to philosophy, to the kind of comfortable silence that only happened between people who'd stopped performing for each other. It was during one of those morning walks, 6 weeks into the arrangement, that everything changed. The air held the sharp bite of approaching winter, frost glittering on the grass like scattered diamonds. Rowan walked beside me, hands clasped behind his back, looking more relaxed than I'd ever seen him. We'd been discussing a book I'd found in the library. a treatise on pack dynamics that challenged everything I'd been taught about Omega submission. The author argues that true strength isn't dominance, I was saying, but the ability to adapt. That Omegas aren't weak, they're simply operating from a different kind of power. You agree with that assessment? Rowan asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. I think power comes in many forms. Yours is obvious. Physical, political, inherited. But there's power in empathy too, in understanding what others need before they know they need it, in being underestimated. I glanced at him. Maybe that's why Elena terrifies everyone. She has both kinds of power, and people don't know how to process that. Rowan stopped walking, turning to face me fully. The morning light caught in his hair, turning it almost auburn, and his eyes held something I'd learned to recognize. The look he got when I'd surprised him, challenged him, made him think about something from a new angle. You defend her, he said quietly, even though she's the reason you're trapped here. Even though when this ends, she'll take everything you've been pretending to have. She's not the reason I'm trapped, the situation is. And besides, I smiled without humor. I can't hate her for being afraid. Fear isn't a choice. How we handle it is. He reached out, his hand hovering near my face as if he wanted to touch me, but couldn't quite give himself permission. How are you real? He murmured, more to himself than to me. Before I could answer, a commotion erupted from the direction of the house. Shouting, the thunder of running feet. And then Sebastian appeared, sprinting toward us with unusual urgency. Your Majesty, he called breathless. We have a situation. The eastern border, there's been an attack. Rowan's entire demeanor shifted, the softness evaporating as he became the Alpha King. How bad? Bad. 3 patrols lost contact. Signs of organized assault, not random rogues. They're coordinated, well-armed, and they're pushing toward the Riverside territory. Sebastian's eyes flickered to me, worried. Elena's pack. My stomach dropped. Whatever political games we'd been playing, people were dying. Real people, not chess pieces on a board. Assemble the War Council, Rowan commanded, already moving back toward the house. Full mobilization protocol. I want reports from every border station and... The council is requesting that Miss Thorne be secured in the safe rooms. Sebastian interrupted carefully. For her protection. Rowan stopped. No. Your Majesty, protocol dictates. I said no. His voice carried an edge that made Sebastian flinch. She stays with me. If we're under threat, I want her where I can see her. It should have felt like protection. Instead, it felt like possession. And I wasn't sure how I felt about the distinction. The next hours blurred into chaos. The War Council convened in a fortified chamber I hadn't known existed. Maps spread across tables, reports streaming in from scouts and border guards. The attack was worse than initial reports suggested. Organized, brutal, and aimed specifically at destabilizing the most vulnerable territories, including Riverside, where Elena's family lived. I watched Rowan transform into something I'd only glimpsed before. A warrior king, decisive and cold, moving pieces across the board with the precision of someone who'd been trained for war since birth. He dispatched troops, coordinated defenses, made decisions that would save or condemn lives with each word. And through it all, he kept me close, not hidden away like a treasure to be protected, but present, visible, included in discussions that most Omegas would never be permitted to hear. Why are they targeting Riverside specifically? I asked during a brief lull, studying the maps. The attack pattern was too precise to be random. Cassius, present for the War Council, sneered. Perhaps the Omega has theories on military strategy now? Actually, Sebastian interjected before Rowan could respond, leaning over the map. She's right to ask. Look at the pattern. They're not trying to break through. They're trying to isolate. Cut off communication. Create panic. Make Riverside vulnerable. To what end? Another council member asked. I studied the map. Something nagging at my memory. A conversation I'd overheard weeks ago, dismissed as unimportant at the time. What if they're not trying to conquer territory? What if they're trying to take someone? The room went silent. Rowan's eyes snapped to mine, sharp and focused. Explain. At the last gathering, I heard some visiting alphas talking about Elena, about her bloodline, her power. What if someone wants to take her? Force a bond? Use her to legitimize a claim to territory? I looked at Rowan. She's valuable, not just politically, but actually, valuable. And right now, she's trapped in the one place they're making sure no one can reach. That's absurd, Cassius said, but his voice lacked conviction. Rowan was already moving, barking orders. Sebastian, take a strike team to Riverside, extract Elena and her family, bring them here.
Use the northern route. Avoid the obvious paths. Cassius, coordinate with the border patrols. Shore up defenses, but don't engage unless necessary. I want information, not a body count. And you? Sebastian asked. I'm going to send a message that makes it very clear what happens to anyone who threatens what's mine. The possessive growl in his voice sent shivers down my spine. The council dispersed, each member moving to their assigned tasks with the efficiency of long practice.
Within minutes, the chamber was empty except for Rowan and me. He stood at the map table, hands braced on the edge, head bowed. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him so heavily I could almost see it, a physical thing crushing the man beneath the crown. You should rest, he said without looking at me. This will take hours, possibly days. No need for you to... I'm not leaving. Ivy, I'm not leaving, I repeated, moving to stand beside him. You said you wanted me where you could see me, so here I am. Use me or don't, but I'm staying. He looked at me then, and the exhaustion in his eyes was staggering. Why? This isn't your fight. These aren't your people. You're only here because we forced you into a role you never wanted. Maybe that was true 6 weeks ago, but it's not true now. The admission felt like stepping off a cliff. These became my people the moment you made me part of them, and you... I hesitated, then pushed forward. You became someone I couldn't walk away from even if I wanted to. The silence stretched between us, loaded with everything we'd been carefully not saying for weeks. You shouldn't care about me, Rowan said quietly, his voice rough. This was supposed to be temporary, safe, uncomplicated. I know. When Elena is ready, this ends. You understand that? I know. Then why? He stopped, jaw clenching. Why are you looking at me like that? Like what? Like I'm something other than a bastard using you for political convenience. I reached out, my hand covering his where it gripped the table. His skin was warm, his fingers rough with calluses earned through training and combat. Because you are something other than that. You're a man trying to do right by people who've given you nothing but impossible choices. You're someone who defends me even when I'm just a placeholder. I took a breath. You're someone I've come to care about, even though I know it's stupid and will only hurt when this ends. His hand turned beneath mine, fingers threading through mine with desperate intensity. This is a mistake. Probably. You deserve better than someone like me. Someone who can actually offer you a future, not just borrowed time. Maybe. But I'd rather have borrowed time with you than forever with someone who doesn't see me. He pulled me closer, his free hand coming up to cup my face with a gentleness that made my chest ache. I see you, he whispered. Gods help me. I see every part of you, and it terrifies me how much I want to keep looking. Then look. He kissed me like a man drowning, like I was air, and he'd been underwater for years. His mouth was desperate and gentle all at once, his hands cradling my face like I was something precious that might shatter. I kissed him back with everything I'd been holding inside, all the longing, the fear, the foolish hope that maybe somehow this could be real. When we finally broke apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against mine. This changes nothing, he said, but his voice shook. Elena still needs to be queen. The arrangement still has an end date. This, he gestured between us, doesn't change the political reality. I know. But I can't. I can't pretend anymore that you're just a convenient placeholder. You've become... He stopped, searching for words. You've become essential, and I don't know what to do with that. Then don't do anything. Not right now. Right now, we have people to protect and a crisis to manage. Everything else can wait. He kissed me again, softer this time, like a promise or an apology. Then he stepped back, visibly pulling himself together, becoming the Alpha King again. Stay in the command center, he said, his voice steady once more. I need to coordinate with the northern patrols. If anything changes, if you hear anything about Sebastian's team, send word immediately. I will. He moved toward the door, then paused, looking back. Ivy, thank you for staying. For seeing me. Then he was gone, and I was alone in a room full of maps marking places where people were dying, holding the memory of his kiss like a secret I didn't know how to keep. Hours passed. Reports came in. Sebastian's team had reached Riverside, found Elena and her family barricaded in their pack house, surrounded by hostiles. Fighting had broken out. Casualties were mounting. I monitored everything from the command center, relaying information to Rowan through the communication network, watching strategies unfold across tables and maps. Nadia brought me food I couldn't eat, tea that went cold while I studied troop movements and tried to understand the larger picture. It was near midnight when Sebastian's voice crackled through the communication stone. Exhausted but triumphant. Package secured. Elena and her family are safe. We're en route to the royal house. ETA 3 hours. The relief was overwhelming. I sent word to Rowan, who was commanding defensive positions on the eastern border, and received back a single message. Well done. I'm coming home. By the time Sebastian's convoy arrived, dawn was breaking. I stood in the courtyard, wrapped in a heavy cloak against the cold, watching as vehicles rolled through the gates. Wounded soldiers were helped to the medical wing. Exhausted fighters stumbled toward the barracks. And Elena emerged from the center vehicle, wrapped in blankets, her face pale but composed. She saw me standing there and stopped. For a long moment, we just looked at each other, the Omega who was supposed to be queen, and the Omega who'd been keeping her seat warm. Then she walked toward me, and I braced for anger, accusation, anything but what came. Thank you, she said quietly. Sebastian told me it was your insight that made him go when he did. Another hour, and we wouldn't have made it out. I'm just glad you're safe. She studied me with intelligent dark eyes that saw too much. You care about him. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. Yes. And he cares about you. I saw it in the messages he sent. The panic when he thought you might be in danger. She looked away, toward the lightening sky. I've been afraid of him for so long. Afraid of what being his queen would mean. The loss of choice. The weight of expectations. The inevitable disappointment when I couldn't be what everyone needed. But watching you these past weeks, seeing how you stand beside him rather than behind him. She turned back to me. Maybe I've been afraid of the wrong things. Elena, I'm not ready. She interrupted gently. I may never be ready, but I can't let fear dictate my life anymore. And I can't let you sacrifice your happiness for mine. She smiled, sad and knowing. Whatever happens next, you should fight for him. He deserves someone who sees him as a man, not a crown. And you deserve to be chosen, not settled for. Before I could respond, Rowan appeared, striding across the courtyard with single-minded purpose. His clothes were dirty, his face haggard, but his eyes were bright and fierce and fixed entirely on me. He didn't stop until he was right in front of me, didn't speak, just pulled me into his arms and held on like I was the only thing keeping him grounded. You're safe. He murmured into my hair. Thank the gods. You're safe. I was never in danger. You were the one. If something had happened to you while I was gone. He pulled back just enough to look at me. I wouldn't have survived it. Do you understand? Somewhere in these past 6 weeks, you stopped being a political convenience and became the thing I couldn't lose. Around us, people watched. Elena watched. The entire household witnessed their king, always so controlled, holding an Omega like she was oxygen itself. The arrangement, I whispered. Elena can make her own choices, Elena said from behind me, as can you, as can His Majesty. She looked at Rowan. I release you from any obligation to me. Find your happiness, Your Majesty. The kingdom will survive with a queen who's chosen rather than assigned. Then she walked away, leaving Rowan and me standing in the dawn light, surrounded by witnesses, with nothing left between us but truth. Choose me, Rowan said, and his voice cracked on the words. Not because of arrangements or obligations or political necessity. Choose me because you want to. Because despite everything, you think maybe we could build something real from all these carefully constructed lies. I looked at him. This broken king who'd learned to hide his heart behind ice, who'd kissed me like I mattered, who'd defended me when I was nothing more than a pawn. and realized the choice had already been made. Probably weeks ago, maybe from the very first moment our eyes met across a crowded hall. "I choose you," I said, "not the crown, not the power, not the position, just you. The man who hates dancing but does it anyway, who carries impossible weight and still manages to be kind, who sees me." He kissed me as the sun rose, in front of gods and witnesses, claiming me not as a political tool but as a partner, as someone real. And for the first time in my life, I felt chosen, not because I was useful or convenient or the best option available, but because I was myself, and somehow, impossibly, that was enough. The council chamber erupted into chaos. "This is unacceptable!" Cassius slammed his hand on the black stone table, his face mottled with rage. "You cannot simply discard a perfectly suitable Omega for whatever this is." "Watch your tone, Cassius," Rowan said, his voice calm but carrying the weight of absolute authority. "You're speaking about my chosen mate." 3 days had passed since the attack on Riverside. 3 days since Rowan had kissed me in front of the entire household, making our relationship undeniably real. 3 days since Elena had released him from their unspoken arrangement and retreated to her family's temporary quarters in the West Wing, looking more relieved than heartbroken. Now, we faced the political consequences. The emergency council had been convened at dawn. All 12 members present, their faces ranging from cautiously supportive to openly hostile. I sat beside Rowan, not behind him, wearing a dress of deep blue that Helen had selected with what might have been approval in her usually stern eyes. "The bloodline concerns alone," another council member began, "are irrelevant," Sebastian interrupted smoothly from his seat. "Miss Thorne's bloodline is northern, traceable back 6 generations. More importantly, she's proven her strategic value. Her insight saved Elena's life and prevented what could have become a territorial war. She got lucky." Cassius spat. "One correct guess doesn't qualify her to be queen. Neither does being born pretty and submissive," I said quietly, and the room went silent. I could feel Rowan tense beside me, uncertain if I was helping or making things worse. "You want to know if I'm qualified? Ask me about the supply routes we need to secure before winter. Ask me about the Southern Alliance Sebastian's been quietly building. Ask me about the Eastern Rebellion's true leadership, because I've been paying attention while you all assumed I was decorative." I stood, moving to the map table, pointing to marked locations. The attack on Riverside wasn't just about Elena, it was a test. They wanted to see how quickly we could respond, what our defensive priorities were, where our attention would focus. And while you were all looking east, they moved supplies and reinforcements here. I marked a position on the western border, preparing for the real assault. Cassius stared at the map, then at me, something like grudging respect flickering in his eyes before being smothered by pride. "You've been spying on intelligence reports. I've been doing my job, which is to support my king and protect this kingdom, whether you believe I'm capable of it or not." Rowan stood, moving to stand beside me. "Ivy has proven herself in ways that matter. Loyalty, intelligence, courage. She stands with me because she chooses to, not because political pressure forced her hand. That's the kind of queen this kingdom needs. Someone who leads through choice, not obligation." "And what of Elena?" an older council member asked, his tone more curious than condemning. "The Riverside Omega was promised consideration. Her pack will feel slighted." "Elena has been consulted," a new voice said from the doorway. We all turned. Elena stood there, dressed simply in gray, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. She looked different than at the gathering, less like a fairy tale creature, more like a woman who'd decided to stop hiding. "Lady Elena," Rowan said, surprise flickering across his face. "You didn't need to." "Yes, I did." She moved into the room with quiet confidence, and I noticed Sebastian's eyes tracking her movement with unusual intensity. "I need to make something clear to this council. His Majesty was never mine to lose. We had an arrangement, one I agreed to out of duty, not desire. Ivy didn't steal anything from me. She freed both of us to find what we actually needed." She turned to address the council directly. "I was terrified of becoming queen. Not because of His Majesty himself, but because I knew I would be performing a role rather than living a life. Ivy doesn't perform. She is. That's her power. And that's what this kingdom needs beside its king." Cassius looked like he'd swallowed something poisonous. This is highly irregular. So is surviving an assassination attempt, Elena replied coolly. So is a king who actually listens to his advisors instead of ruling through fear. Perhaps irregular is exactly what we need. Sebastian was grinning now, making no attempt to hide his admiration. I second Lady Elena's assessment. Miss Thorne, Ivy, has proven herself worthy of the position. I recommend we proceed with the bonding ceremony. I third it, another council member said, then another. Within minutes, 7 of the 12 had voiced support. Cassius stood abruptly. This is a mistake. Mark my words, Your Majesty. Choosing an unsuitable Omega out of sentiment will weaken your position. The Southern Pax will see it as a sign of weakness. The Eastern rebels will be emboldened. You're allowing emotion to cloud judgment. No, Rowan said quietly. I'm allowing myself to be human for the first time in a decade. If that's weakness, so be it. But I'd rather be weak and real than strong and hollow. He looked at me, and everything he felt was written plainly on his face. Love, fear, hope, determination. Ivy Thorne, will you bond with me? Not as a political arrangement, not as a duty, but as a true mate. Will you be my queen, my partner, my equal in all things? My throat tightened. 6 weeks ago, I'd been nobody. Invisible. A placeholder in someone else's story. Now I stood in a council chamber, being asked to become a queen by a king who'd learned to see past crowns and expectations to the person underneath. Yes, I said, and my voice didn't shake. I choose you. I choose this. All of it. The bonding ceremony was scheduled for the following week, giving time for preparations and for word to spread throughout the territories. Helen threw herself into planning with unexpected enthusiasm, muttering about, finally, someone with sense, as she measured me for ceremonial gowns. Nadia became my unofficial lady-in-waiting, chattering excitedly about flowers and decorations, while helping me navigate the complex etiquette of royal transitions. You're going to be amazing, she said one afternoon, while we reviewed seating arrangements. Everyone in the household is talking about how you actually speak to His Majesty like he's a person, not a god. It's refreshing. He is a person, I said. Just one who's been forced to pretend otherwise for too long. The days blurred together, meetings with pack leaders, introductions to nobility, lessons in protocol I'd never needed before. Through it all, Rowan was my constant, stealing moments alone whenever possible, teaching me the nuances of leadership while learning from me the value of vulnerability. Elena remained at the royal house, and I watched with interest as she and Sebastian grew closer. They'd sit in the library for hours, talking in low voices, and the fear that had defined Elena's interactions with alphas seemed to fade when Sebastian was near. He was gentle with her, patient, never pushing, and I thought maybe she'd found what she'd been looking for, someone who made her feel safe rather than trapped. They're good together, Rowan observed one evening, watching them through the library window. Sebastian's wanted to challenge for leadership of the Southern Territories, but never had the political backing. With Elena as his mate, they'd be a power couple, I finished. Is that what you're hoping for? I'm hoping they find happiness. The political benefits are just a bonus. He pulled me against his chest, arms wrapping around me from behind. Like us. The fact that you make me a better king is just a bonus. The real gift is that you make me remember how to be a man. I leaned into him, savoring the warmth and security of his embrace. You were always a man. You just forgot how to let people see it. The night before the bonding ceremony, I couldn't sleep. I stood at the window of my chambers, soon to be our chambers, watching moonlight silver the forest, thinking about how drastically my life had transformed. A knock at the door startled me from my thoughts. Come in, I called, expecting Helen with some last-minute detail. Instead, Elena entered, carrying something wrapped in cloth. She looked nervous, uncertain, more like the frightened Omega I'd first seen than the confident woman she'd become. I'm sorry to disturb you, she said. I wanted to give you something before tomorrow. She unwrapped the cloth, revealing a circlet of silver worked into the shape of intertwining wolves. It was beautiful, delicate yet strong, clearly old, and incredibly valuable. This belonged to Rowan's mother, Elena explained. His sister Celia wore it at her first formal gathering before... She trailed off, the unspoken tragedy hanging between us. Helen gave it to me weeks ago, when everyone still thought I'd be queen. But it should be yours. You're the one he chose. The one who chose him back. I took the circlet carefully, feeling the weight of history and grief and hope it carried. Elena, this is too much. It's exactly enough, she smiled. And it was genuine, warm. You saved my life, Ivy. You freed me from a future I dreaded. And you gave Rowan something I never could, the courage to be vulnerable. This is just a piece of silver. What you've given is worth infinitely more. I hugged her. This Omega who could have been my rival but became my friend instead. Thank you. For understanding. For not hating me. How could I hate you? You're everything I needed to be brave enough to become. She pulled back, her expression turning mischievous. Besides, Sebastian has asked me to bond with him. I'm going to be a Southern queen, which means we'll be allies. Sisters, in a way. He asked you? Last night. Very romantically, I might add. Lots of poetry and moonlight. She laughed, the sound light and free. Turns out, the right alpha doesn't feel like a trap. He feels like freedom. After she left, I held the circlet and let myself cry. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that I'd found a place where I belonged. Where people saw me, valued me, chose me not despite my ordinariness, but because of everything that made me myself. The bonding ceremony took place in the Great Hall at sunset, the room packed with witnesses from every territory. I wore a gown of white and silver, the circlet Elena had given me crowning my hair, and felt like I was walking into a dream. Rowan waited at the altar in formal black, his eyes never leaving me as I walked the long aisle. When I reached him, he took my hands in his, and I felt the tremor that ran through him. Not fear, but overwhelming emotion barely contained. The officiant spoke the traditional words about bonds and unity, about strength found in partnership, but I barely heard them. I was too focused on Rowan, on the way he looked at me like I was the answer to every question he'd forgotten how to ask. When it came time for the vows, Rowan spoke first, his voice carrying through the hall. I, Rowan Ashford, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, choose you, Ivy Thorne, not as a political alliance, not as duty, but as my mate, my equal, my partner in all things. You've taught me that strength isn't always armor, that vulnerability isn't weakness, and that love is worth the risk of loss. I vow to protect you, honor you, see you, and choose you every day for the rest of our lives. Then it was my turn, and I spoke the words I'd written in the quiet hours of morning, when truth came easiest. I, Ivy Thorne, choose you, Rowan Ashford. You saw me when I was invisible, valued me when I felt worthless, and loved me when I'd forgotten how to love myself. I vow to stand beside you, challenge you, support you, and remind you every day that you're more than a crown. You're a man worth choosing. For all my days, I am yours, and you are mine. The bonding mark appeared as we kissed. A silver wolf on my collarbone, a matching mark on his. The room erupted in cheers, but I barely heard them. I was too lost in the feeling of completeness, of two broken pieces finally fitting together into something whole. The celebration lasted until dawn. I danced with Rowan, with Sebastian, even with a grudgingly respectful Cassius who admitted, "You may yet prove me wrong, Your Majesty. I almost hope you do." "I will," I promised him. "Watch me." Elena and Sebastian announced their own engagement that night, to enthusiastic approval from the Southern delegates. I watched them dance, watched Elena laugh without fear, and felt a deep satisfaction knowing that everyone had found their right place. As the sun rose on my first day as queen, Rowan pulled me away from the celebration, leading me to the balcony that overlooked the estate. The forest stretched before us, touched with gold from the dawn light, beautiful and wild and free. "Do you regret it?" he asked quietly. "Everything you gave up to be here?" I thought about the girl I'd been, invisible, rejected, convinced she'd never belong anywhere. Then I thought about the woman I'd become, seen, chosen, standing beside a king who loved her for exactly who she was. "I didn't give up anything," I said, lacing my fingers through his. "I found everything." He kissed me as the sun climbed higher, and in that moment, I understood what I'd been searching for all along. Not a place where I could hide from being ordinary, but a place where my ordinariness was exactly what was needed. Where being real was more valuable than being perfect. Where I was chosen not despite my flaws, but because my flaws made me human, relatable, real. Years later, when they asked how a Packless Omega became queen, I would tell them the truth. I stopped trying to be what everyone expected and started being what one person needed, myself. And he, in turn, became what I needed. A partner who saw past every carefully constructed wall to the person trembling underneath. We ruled together for decades, Rowan and I. We faced rebellions and forged alliances. We raised children who learned that strength came in many forms. We transformed a kingdom that valued dominance into one that valued balance. But more than any of that, we proved that the greatest power doesn't come from being invincible. It comes from being brave enough to be vulnerable with the right person. From choosing love, even when duty demanded otherwise. From believing that sometimes, the pawn becomes the queen not through conquest, but through the simple, radical act of being authentically, unapologetically herself. And we lived, not perfectly, not without struggle, but fully, choosing each other every day until our last. Sebastian and Elena ruled the Southern Territories with wisdom and compassion, their bond a testament to patience and understanding. They visited often, bringing their own children to play with ours, building bridges between territories that had been fractured for generations. Helen remained the backbone of the household until her peaceful death at 90, surrounded by 3 generations of the family she'd helped raise. Nadia became head of the royal household herself, training young staff with the same kindness she'd shown me. Even Cassius eventually mellowed, becoming one of my strongest supporters, after I helped negotiate a trade agreement that saved the Western Territories from economic collapse. "You're insufferably competent," he grumbled once. But there was approval in his eyes. The circlet that had belonged to Rowan's mother, then his sister, then Elena, and finally me, was passed down to our eldest daughter. She wore it at her own bonding ceremony, continuing a legacy that had transformed from tragedy to hope to triumph. And on quiet nights, when the kingdom slept and we were just 2 people tangled in sheets and moonlight, Rowan would trace the bond mark on my collarbone and whisper, "I would choose you in every lifetime. In every possible world, you are my impossible gift, and you are mine," I would whisper back. My broken king who learned to be whole. My greatest choice. My home. Because in the end, that's what this story was always about. Not power or politics or palace intrigue, but 2 wounded souls finding in each other the courage to heal, to grow, to transform from their assigned roles into the people they were always meant to be. I came to the royal house as a pawn, a placeholder, a temporary solution to someone else's problem. I left nothing behind when I died many years later, except a legacy of compassion, a kingdom transformed, and a love story that proved the most powerful magic isn't dominance or destiny. It's the simple, extraordinary act of choosing someone and being chosen in return. Not because you're perfect, but because you're perfectly, authentically, courageously you. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, that's exactly enough.